Welcome back. I'm joined by Christina Guerrier, political science professor at Fordham and an editor at The Grio, and Steve Bennett, an MSNBC contributor and Emmy-winning producer for The Rachel Maddow Show, one of our colleagues. And we are happy to announce here on The Beat, his new book is The Imposters: How Republicans Quit Governing and Seize American Politics. Steve, I know you as a colleague, but I was reading you before you were one, and congrats on the book, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
100. And Christina, always good to have you back here on the program. Same question to both of you, starting with Steve. Why do those friends of Trump look so nervous? How do you view this going into what I've emphasized is a completely fluid election season?
I think you're right. I think that at this point in the process, the Republicans are concerned. I think the key point that you raised in that earlier segment was the fact that there is no agenda. We don't know what Donald Trump wants to do with the second term. That was an easy question he got from Sean Hannity last night. And he couldn't answer it in large part because he's not a member of a governing party. And that's the whole point of my book, that there's no agenda, there's no policy vision, there's no real sense of what he would do with power. He just wants to hold power, but he doesn't know why, and he can't communicate to the voters why.
You mentioned your book, so how much of what you chart in the book, a kind of a fundamental shift in how the Republican Party organizes itself, what it thinks it stands for, how much of that do you think is just, in your view, a concern for what's good or bad in the country? And how much of that do you view actually as a political liability, Steve?
Well, I think it's a political liability insofar as they can't communicate to the voters what they would do with power. And so therefore, voters don't know what to vote for. They don't have a sense necessarily of what Republicans stand for. We've looked back over the last decade or so, and Republicans have no real sense of what they want to do with power. So they become what I call a post-policy party, a party that's become indifferent to the substance of policymaking. And so I think in terms of political liabilities, voters who were looking for people to solve problems can't look to GOP officials because they've abandoned their role as a governing party.
Christina?
I agree with Steve. I mean, think of it this way, Ari, for those who voted for Donald Trump in 2016, many of them voted for the wall. 3 miles have been built. Many of them voted for tax cuts. Several million Americans are not going to see those benefits. The president just announced that he's going to try and fight to defund the ACA, that's healthcare, with the Supreme Court. He's putting pressure on his colleagues in Congress to do so. In the middle of a global pandemic when more and more Americans need health care. And so he's always a step behind these days. And I think this is the first time we're really seeing the president on the defensive. You're seeing old guard Republicans saying that they'll vote for Joe Biden or at least support Joe Biden. You're seeing Republicans seeing spikes in their states, senators and governors, and not going along with just the normal rhetoric of the president. And as Steve said, what is the policy prescription that you propose for the next 4 years? It can't just be sad rallies talking about Hillary Clinton, talking about the leftist media when people are literally in breadlines, when many are, in hospitals and trying to figure out what will be the guidance of our leadership when the international community left us behind. And so many Americans are feeling like they're falling behind compared to their colleagues and their community members.
Well, Christina, can I give you the president's counter argument to that?
Sure.
Experience is a word.
Right. But here's the thing,
which is true. By the way, in fairness, Christina, it is a word.
It is a word. But when you've got, let's think about it. Let's think about the severity of this, right? We know that a third of all African Americans know someone who has died of COVID. We know that there are 40 million Americans who have applied for unemployment, not even considering the number of Americans who aren't even in occupations who are eligible to receive unemployment. This country is really hurting. And we always ask ourselves, we've talked about this for years. When you go to the polls, can you ask yourself, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And there are going to be a lot of independents and quite a few Republicans who are going to have to ask themselves the hard questions and possibly say no. And we're leaving aside the Republicans who don't like the racial animus or what I would call racism and anti-Semitism and xenophobia that also comes along with the incompetence and the experience as a word.
Well, Steve, Christina, as she so often does on this program and elsewhere, lays it out, makes the strong points. And I think that goes to the connection between what we've been covering throughout the week, which is bright red MAGA governors like in Texas and Florida going, we tried, we did what we did. uncle, buckle, can't go on, can't reopen. That tells you something. That is always first a healthcare and public wellness issue, and we've covered it as such. But on the politics, Steve, you can see this. Trump's sagging popularity, dragging down candidates in the state level, governors and senates running statewide. Down ballot Republicans will have to decide if they will ride the Trump train to its final destination, the New York Times notes, or if they need to establish some independence. That's from a Republican quoted there in the story. Steve.
I think part of the problem is even if they were to try to distance themselves from Trump, they have no real record to run on. They have no real agenda to run on. You can't look to Republicans at any level of government right now and say, well, with all the major challenges facing the country, here's a group of people with a platform. Here's a group of people with a vision. Here's an agenda that they can present to the public. There's nothing there. They literally don't even have a platform. They're recycling their 2016 platform. And so what is it that they can propose in terms of solutions to the problems that people are dealing with in their daily lives?
Right.
I think it's a blank slate.
Well, and Steve, that really comes back to the work you've been doing, and you write about it for MSNBC.com and in the book, that what you called post-policy. And we didn't know when we planned to have you on that Donald Trump would be on TV last night sounding like he literally couldn't come up with 15 seconds of policy for re-election. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.